Now I'm going to play around with a 1K boost just to see if I can get some cool mid-range out of this kick. I always give this a try just to see, because if you think about records like the newer Hawthorne Heights stuff, they've got quite a good 1K boost in their kick drums and they really come forward. I like that sound, so let's give that a try. Yes, that's sort of like a thump, like a chest thump without it being low end and boomy. And I do like it. I'm obviously not going to keep it at 10. That's a massive 10 decibels is huge. But that's the kind of sound I'm looking for. And if I can blend that into my kicks, they really do give you like a thud without ruining the low end. Want to see everything about how I mixed this song? This is part 2 of this real-time mixing video series where we will mix a song from start to finish, all in real time without cutting out or skimming past anything. In the description is a link to the finished song, and if you wanted to grab the multi-tracks and mix it yourself, they are available from my Shopify in the link in the top right corner. Right, straight into it. So last time, we got the guitar tone in there. We got a very rough bass sound in there with our multi-track bass system. We got a bit of kick compression happening here. And then we got like a rough balance of everything so we can start making some mixed decisions and get going. And it's starting to sound like a very unmixed raw song. So let me remind you of what we have so far. Yeah, so we just about got some kick compression. The next thing we were going to do was get some snare compression happening. So this is the snare and I want to get it compressed so that it has the same sort of punch that the kick has. Cool, so kick and snare together. Yeah, you can hear how the kick is way punchier than the snare. So let's get that snare compression happening. We'll get a rough amount of gain reduction happening on this FG stress here, and then I'm going to bring the track in and we'll get it to vibe with the track. Cool. So 2-to-1 compression on here. It's not a lot in terms of ratio. 4-to-1 is probably more like what you'd start with if you wanted like big modern sounding compressed snare. So if it was more along the lines of like State Champs, where it's like a big modern kick and snare and you can tell there's, that there's samples enhancing them and it's not really like an authentic human sound. It's more like a big modern in your face sound. I've got nothing against that. I love mixing that too. That's more of a 4-to-1 thing. This is 2-to-1 because I'm trying to keep the snare reminiscent of like 2004 to 2007, that kind of era. That's why I've got quite a prominent snare bottom track in there. I don't want it to be here's a massive snare, like it's a cannon every single time. I'm trying to keep it a bit more fluid and natural sounding, but I still obviously want upfront drums and punch. But these are parts of this sort of like philosophical decisions that you make while you're mixing, depending on what your end result is going to be or what you want it to be. Let's bring that track in now. Yeah, cool. A lot of transient, very dry sounding snare. It's not necessarily dull and boxy, but it's lacking like some crack. You want some top end presence coming in there. This is where I'm going to start to bring in some EQ for the snare, but also the kick as we go, because I want to keep them in line with each other. I want them to feel like they're together. I don't want to like mix the kick, then mix the snare, and then put them together and go, oh, they're kind of mismatched. So I think before anything else, I'm going to bring in some snare verb. You've noticed I've got this snare verb track here. This is ready for me to start routing the snare tracks too. I'm not going to route it from the snare bus, which we have here. We've got these individual snare tracks. I'm going to route it from there so I can get I can do like a sub balance going to the snare verb. First of all, I want to pick my verb. The first thing I'm going to try is I'll go for the Valhalla Room. But even the Logic Chroma Verb, great for this kind of thing. It's literally just to put the snare in a space, because you never hear a dry snare like that. You know, I'm going to put it so that our ears can make sense of it. It's really not going to be that prominent. So on this rooms thing, I've got this snare big room, you know, or music club, those kinds of things where I'm used to hearing snares. Let's try a music club, and so I'm going to route the punk snare, which is from GGD One Kit Wonder Pop Punk. I'll send that to our snare. I'll send that to our snare verb. I'm going to do this snare too, because it's the high tuned crack snare, and that's a snare verb, and definitely want a little bit of this snare bottom in there too. I'll route that. I'm going to route it a little quieter. We'll see if that's right or wrong when we start hearing it. Just guessing at this point. This is the kind of more boxy one. This can make reverb sound very boxy, so we'll put a little bit in there, but I'm going to keep it low for now. So I've got that going in at -9. Let's hear this. I don't like that at all. That's not. It's sort of doing like a woom woom, and there's too much of that like muddy lower mids in there. Let's cycle through some presets. I think that's probably a bit too big of a tail. Probably more for like a slower, sort of like a slower groove. If I played the whole track in with this, then no, not really what I'm after. Try this studio beta. Now that's cool. See how that's like quite a short tail. We've got a quick song here. It's punky. Yes, it's emo, but it's punky. So I don't want a big long tail. I just wanted some space around that snare, and this sounds good. I might increase the pre-delay so that it's not going to muddy up our transient too much. Hear that with the kick. Okay, might compress it and EQ it in a bit, but we're gonna work with what we've got there and get some EQ on the snare. Cool, I didn't EQ anything there. I went back and I felt like I needed to increase that pre-delay on the verb, but now that it's there, I can sort of hear the space. I can't tell there's a reverb on it with the mix in there, and our transient's intact. So now I'm going to start to get some EQ going. So the first thing I want to do is get some crack on that snare, because it does sound a little dull to me. So an EQ I like to use, but again, this is just a preference thing. I've got to follow this exact thing with these exact EQs. This API channel strip plugin here, this API 550B from Waves, and I'm going to see if I can get some crack from this. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, okay. A little bit sharp, but it's getting there. I want to now bring the kick in and get some kick EQ going so that I can start to hear it as a proper song. Right now, it just sounds like the snare's sticking out. This is what we've got now with the EQ. Yeah, that snap that I want is there. So I've got a 2.5K 2 decibel boost. I've got an 8K 2 decibel boost, and I've got a 200 for the punch. That's why it's quite subtle. It's sampled drums, right? I don't need to do too much to get them to sound punchy and up front. So now it's time to do it with the kick. I'm going to try it with the same EQ to keep things in line with each other, but I might swap over to the SSL channel like I did on the guitars. Let's have a listen. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. In fact, what I'm going to do is on 3K, I'm going to remove some lot of chirpiness. I don't like this 3K sound on kick. And whenever I'm trying to get some presence out with it, I'm hearing this little chirpiness. So I'm going to bring up a graphic EQ. I'm going to pull out that chirpiness. Cool. Also thinking that the actual balance between the kick drums is a little bit too heavy on the kick trigger one shot. So let's rebalance these. I'm going to bring that down a little bit. Yeah, that's more of what I want to hear there. Yeah, that's better. So it's not so dominated by that one shot. There's a bit more dynamic in there now. Cool. So I'm going to actually switch over to the SSL channel. Let's get some EQing going. Cool, just put on a very, very gentle high pass filter, and now we'll do it in context. Cool. So I found this one quite quickly, this sort of like 4K area with a narrow hue here. I felt that had a bit of bite to it. The 2K one that we did with the previous EQ that I was trying out, I didn't like. But this one feels a bit better. It's less sort of like 2K, doesn't clash with the guitars as much, I gave it a bit of bite. Wanted a bit of like top end click to it. Might bring this down, but the 10K was way too clicky. That sounded really metalcore. If I show you that again. So this 10K with the tracking sounded too metalcore to me. Yeah, so when I increase it, you can sort of hear that. If you take it back to 8K, a bit nicer. Yeah, so it's less sample heavy when it's at 8K. 10K is a hard boost to get on a real life kick because you got cymbal bleed and stuff. Even when you mic it up really well, you've still got quite a job to get a 10K boost. That's why it leans towards like a sample kick, because you can get that cool high pitched click out of it because it's sampled. But I don't want to give it away and be like, this is a metalcore, sample heavy kick sound. Then we went down here, and I try to do like 60 and maybe boost the bass at like 80, but it felt better at 80 down here. 60 felt a little bit too boomy, and the tail was a little bit the low end was moving in not a nice way. 80 felt a bit cleaner to me. Now I'm going to play around with a 1K boost just to see if I can get some cool mid-range out of this kick, but there's a good chance it won't work. I always give this a try just to see, because if you think about records like the newer Hawthorne Heights stuff, they've got quite a good 1K boost in their kick drums and they really come forward. I like that sound, but it doesn't always work. So let's give that a try. Yeah, so that's sort of like a thump, like a chest thump without it being low end and boomy. And I do like it. I'm obviously not going to keep it at 10. That's a massive 10 decibels is huge. But that's the kind of sound I'm looking for. And if I can blend that into my kicks, they really do give you like a thud without ruining the low end, which is cool. Yeah, liking how that's sounding. So if I turn this EQ off and on, and we'll make sure that we haven't made it worse. Yeah, and you're seeing the beauty of us doing the rough balance first now, because the kick is there. Because we've balanced it, these EQ moves are bringing the kicks through the guitars. Because the kick is already just about there volume-wise, we're not just trying to EQ it just to hear it. We can hear it already, but we're bringing what works through the guitars. That's how I like to work with this stuff, and that's why I don't really like mixing in solo for too long. So now we can move on to the snare EQ and try and, not going to be the same moves, but we're going to try and match them so that they sound coherent, or they already do sort of vibe together. Straight away I can hear that the snare needs more top end, because now we've got that presence in the kick. The snare actually sounds duller than the kick. Yeah, right, you can hear that. So controversial move, I'm actually going to put, before we start EQing that, I feel like it's such a clean transient coming through from that snare, which is good, but I'm going to just make it sound a little bit more, or a little bit less in the box. I'm going to make it sound a little bit more analog by, first of all, putting some saturation. Don't know why it's opened up that plugin. Saturn 2 should be that. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to put some tape saturation first on this snare, just to sort of tame that transient to make it sound a little bit more analog. Cool. It's going to need a little bit more drive, so I'm just going to gain stage this plugin, because Saturn 2 works best when the input is around -6, -9, sort of that kind of area. So I'm going to bring the input gain down and the output gain up. If I mute those two, I can see what's actually going into this plugin. Yeah, there we go. So that is transparent. I'm bringing it down and then I'm bringing it up. It's pretty much the same amount after the processing. Very subtle, very hard to hear, but it does make a difference, because eventually when this whole mix is coming in, if we have a really clean, dry transient, it's not really gonna sound right. Cool, do you want some top end on that? So I've got two choices that I like to use. I'm going to use this Mag EQ to start with. This has a really nice 2.5K and it has a really nice air band. If that's doing too much, bringing the snare bottom out too much, then I'm going to switch it up to a different plugin. But let's try this one first. Maybe. Very dry, so I'm going to try and sneak some of this verb back in. let's audition the other plugin, which is from Waves Factory, Spectre. So this is effectively an exciter, I guess. It saturates. It's not like it looks like an EQ, but it's not. It saturates the EQ band that you boost, basically. So it's a lot smoother than EQ. Can get kind of wild, so you've got to be careful, but it's really nice to shape a sound with. And with a snare where you've got so much transient, you're not gonna kill that. Okay, so this is starting to get tricky because it's not really sitting how I like. So what I'm going to do is I think this snare 2 might be causing me a little bit too much bite and presence that's so super dry that it doesn't sound like a natural snare. So I'm actually going to bring this down and fade it in so I'm affecting the balance of our different snare samples. Okay, now I think I'm going to reduce some boxiness and then I'm going to reevaluate what we've done with our EQ boost. Cool. We're getting there. It's still, the problem I'm having is that it's so dry still. So I think it might be time to bring in some of the rooms and stuff so that it doesn't sound like such a dry snare. Getting there with the EQ, but again, this is a real-time mixing video, so I'm solving the problems in real time. I'm jumping back and forth. I don't want to just be like, this is my solved mix and this is how I did it. I just want to show how mixing happens sort of organically. And all these little decisions add up. So I'm going to just quickly bring a clipper into this snare to help with that transient, and then I'm going to start bringing the rooms in. Yeah, I'm starting to like that a bit more now that I've brought the volume down a little bit, sinking it into the mix. So let's get these rooms going. Like I said in the first video, rooms are really underappreciated in sampled drums. And as you can see, if you look, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 room tracks. I like to use a lot of rooms to glue the drum kit together, put it in a space without, using drum verbs much. So let's solo out the drums and start working on these rooms. I know it's probably hard to keep track of what these all are. So this punk room is the room that accompanies the punk snare, which is from GGD One Kit Wonder Pop Punk. If you want to see how I export out all my program drums and sort of the method behind it, and you haven't already watched it from when I tagged it in the first video, I'll tag it again here so you can have a look, and maybe it'll make more sense. But for the purpose of this, just know that this room track here is just the snare and the toms from the GGD One Kit Wonder Pop Punk. Actually, I think part of the dryness that I'm struggling with is because that's quite a prominent snare in my snare tracks, but this is actually really low down. So I'm going to boost this. I'm just going to give it some more gain on the whole region. Yeah, that's more like it. Now let's compress this because I want it to be a bit more of a feature. I really like how it sounds. I'm going to start with the same compressor and the same ratio as the snare, and we'll work from there just as a starting point. Let's hear that with just the drums. More of a tail on that, so I'm actually going to slow the release down. Cool, let's hear that with the whole song. Yeah, it's starting to vibe a bit better. Just quickly, if you make music like this and you want me to mix your next song or release, head over to my website, terrybeckleyrecording.com, scroll down to the contact form, send me a message there, and I will get back to you. The link is in the description. Now I think I can probably bring out some more top end from that snare. Yeah, I'm liking that. So drum rooms we'll come back to. Now I think it might be time to go to our drum bus and get some bus compression happening. So first thing I want to do is actually add some saturation that you'd get from like the summing bus on a mixer. I'm going to use the non-linear summer for this from Waves. And this is going to be hard to hear, but is it subtle? But these things add up over time with the whole mix. Right, so the difference between this Neve and this mic one here, there's so much more like low end in the mic one. I'm just trying to work out what I actually prefer, so I'm going to do it with the whole track. tough because that bit there where the chord goes down, it gets darker. The mic one had a really good vibe, but the Neve is quite punchy and quite present. So I'm just trying to pick what I actually prefer. The mic is better for the kick, and the Neve is sort of catching the snare in a nice way. I'm going to go with the mic. I think this is a bit of a darker song. It's not so... If it was pop, just pure pop punk, I'd probably go for that Neve. But I also like what this does to the cymbals. It sort of darkens them, and I want to sort of give a more emotional, moody sound to it. So bring that back a little bit. I exaggerated it for the effect, and then we're going to start compressing. Yeah, sounding cool. Right, let's get some compression happening. So I use the Townhouse from Plugin Alliance. It's expensive until it goes on sale, then it gets really cheap. But this is basically just SSL style compression. So if you have the SSL comp from Waves, or you could just use something that looks kind of similar from the compressors that come with Logic, they're great as well. I'm going to use this. Cool, so I'm going to go with punch to begin with. So I'm going to go for a slow attack and a fast release. We'll do a 4:1 ratio, and we're going to play with the threshold, so the needle's sort of jumping on the kick snare. That really brings the kick out. I quite like how that's sort of really pushing that forward. Might slow the release down ever so slightly. Nah, the life has gone from that. Yeah, certainly over compressed if I change those attack and release times, but that's cool. I like that. Yeah, starting to come together really well. The overheads sound so nice from Modern and Massive too. Let me just play them by themselves. A little bit of spike that we can tame. It might be worth doing that now. So if I quickly get something that's going to tame those peaks, I'm going to use Soothe. However, this is a peak you can catch with an EQ, but Soothe just does this really well. I'm going to do it in dual mono because I'm going to have it affect the left and the right channels. Although the settings are going to be the same, but they're only going to work on the left and right channels independently. So let's start with cymbal smooth. This can often be too drastic. Yeah, I quite like what that's doing. Now, so you can imagine you can get that sort of similar result with an EQ by being clever with the notches. Just going to further it by doing a few notches of my own from FabFilter again, just for the spikiness. Cool. I don't think I need to. The room is such a nice sounding room. I'm not going to put a high pass filter on there because I like what it's adding to the drums and stuff. So these together, you'll see what I've done for the overheads. I'm going to mute both plugins and then bring them both in. Ever so slightly just soften that top end there. I don't think we're going to need some compression on it. They're quite present in the mix. They are not overly compressed and they're moving, which is where a lot of the feel comes from with the overheads. This is why the Modern and Massive 2 is so good, because it's got such a natural human feel to it. yeah, I haven't really had to mix that too much. The ride bell, I just want to get a bit more mid-range out, mid-range for a ride bell, not mid-range in terms of the whole spectrum. But I just want a bit more of that sort of, it's a bit tinny for me at the moment. Actually, let's move this to a different part of the song where I've got a bit more. Oh, forgive the DI track there. We'll mute that. Yeah, I kind of want a bit more of that sort of darker sound to it. Back to the chorus now and hear that again. So this room track here is from Drumforge, which is the same one that the same drum sampler that the ride is from. So I want to give the ride a bit of space because it seems a little bit exposed right now with a bit more from this room. Cool, I think just a volume boost is probably going to do that. Yeah, I'm liking how this is vibing and coming together. Now, with the drums, there's very little mixing that I actually need to do on the overheads, rooms, and toms because of how I've picked the samples and stuff. Again, in the description will be a link to the video on how I pick the samples and what I use. And also, if you did notice, when we did the rough balance and the gain staging, I left the toms loud because whenever I bring the toms gain stage and bring them down and then try to EQ them into the mix, it just doesn't work. I don't know what it is about it, but this is before I use loads and loads of different tom samples. As you can see, look, I've got all these tom samples here. Before I used that even, I felt like the EQ was just making the toms sound weird. So I leave the toms loud, and then if it becomes a problem when we start doing bus compression and mastering, that's when I'll bring them down. But for now, we're doing okay. Just lacking a little bit of brightness from the fact that we've got a bright kick and snare. So let me bring up that same Q4 in stereo because we've got a stereo bus of toms here. Let's give it some 2K, yeah. Sticking out a little bit there. Maybe a bit of mid-range will help us. So I've boosted it at 1.5K. Yeah, that sounds a bit more natural now. We'll work on that bit there with a bigger tom feel when we've actually got the rest of the song working, because right now only really the chorus is in place. Cool, this is sounding pretty decent. I think now would be a good time to bring in some actual bus compression for the whole mix before we start going any further. So same thing on this 2 bus here. So all of my everything ends up going through this 2 bus here. I want to bring some compression into that. So first of all, I'm going to again go back to this non-linear summer and get a bit of that analog sound in there. I actually like the Neve on that, so I'll use that. Cool, and then we're going to get some compression, so we'll go back to the townhouse again, stereo, and I'm going to go with mix bus start, and we'll go from here. So messing with the attack and release, where it was set on auto, I'm just going to compare that with a few other things. And then I've got to bring the threshold down so that it's actually really over compressing it so that I can sort of properly hear what it's doing. And then we're going to bring it back to a more normal sounding level. I like the auto, you know, it's moving the song. Very hard to explain because you can't quite hear. You have to sort of listen to the whole thing. It's sort of moving the song. Obviously got it happening quite dramatically, so I'm going to bring that down a little bit. But on a 2-to-1 ratio with a 3 on the attack and auto on the release, it's kind of just moving in the right way. So I'm making it a bit quieter with this compressor, but if you listen past that, you can sort of hear things are sort of flying around a little bit. This sort of brings them all in to like they're sort of just a little bit around everything, bringing it all into being one song, which is going to help us have everything together as a song rather than having like, here's your kick, snare, guitars, it's going to be all together. And then, cool, so I like where we're at for the time being. I'm just going to add a little bit of a clipper on the kick. And then, so that we've got the same sort of feel happening with the snare. It might not work, we're going to try it out. And then we'll move on to bass. Yeah, I love what clippers do to kick and snares. Cool. So next thing now, again, all of this can be revisited, but it's time to move on to bass, I think, because I want to get that low end and the bass vibing. It's already sounding really nice, but I want to get that extra like 10% out of it. So this is how the bass sounds now. It's cool. It's cool. But it's time to just get it playing nicely and safe and in line with the song. So first thing I want to do is give it like a safety multi-band compression. And this will stop the bass from taking over at certain points. And we're going to keep that low end in place. It's already pretty consistent from it being like a programmed bass anyway. But there's still certain spots where it can cause us problems. So this is what we'll use a C4. I know this is old school. There are obviously much newer ones you can use. And if you have them, by all means, like if you've got the Pro MB from FabFilter, you know, that's really good. I'm gonna just keep this sub intact. So let's have a play. Yeah, so you can just see it jumping around. It's such a consistent bass. If you've got a human played bass, it's a bit more dynamic. You're going to want to see a little bit more movement in that most likely. And you probably want to move this band around here. But I know the tuning of this song is there's not going to be much going up the neck that we're going to want to contain. So therefore I can leave it quite low down in the sub region here. Cool. Now let's get some weight out of this. I know we got weight out of the tones that we picked. If you remember from the last video, we were using an Ampeg blended in with just the DI, and we also used the parallax for that grit. For example, so if I got rid of the parallax one, we'd hear a very clean bass. And then the parallax gives it. which is the sort of like heavier, and this is emo, so I'm trying to give it a bit of like, I don't know how else to describe it. Okay, so in part 3 of this series, we'll move on to bass, get that properly mixed, and then we're going to work on the other parts of the song that have guitar tones that need finishing off. At that point then, we'll have pretty much the basis of the song, and then it'll be vocals. So if you want to see other videos on mixing pop punk and similar music to this, then head over to my channel. There's a ton of videos there. And if you want to see how I'd go about mixing drums in a pure pop punk song, then you can watch this video here. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.